gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On October 21st, the Attorney General of the United States was in front of this committee and made this statement, quote, "I could not imagine any circumstance where parents are labeled domestic terrorists." One problem with that statement. The day before he said that to this committee, the House Judiciary Committee, the day before, there was an email sent to FBI agents around the country stating just the opposite. Email sent from the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI, treating parents, labeling parents, categorizing parents as a threat tag for simply showing up at school board meetings and speaking their mind, objecting to a racist, hate America curriculum. They're getting labeled, and we know this because of a brave whistleblower who came forward 24 hours ago. We have this information. And if the gentleman from North Carolina, my colleague, Mr. Bishop, had been able to make his inquiry of the chairman, was not recognized by the chairman, even though this happened, even though it calls into question whether the Attorney General misled the House Judiciary Committee with his comments that day. If he'd been recognized, he was also going to point out that he had sent a letter to the Justice Department asking, what have you done as a result of that October 4th memo? No answer. We know what they did. They sent out this email to FBI agents saying spy on parents. But you wouldn't even recognize him. You wouldn't even recognize him. I mean, this scenario where on September 29th, a left-wing political organization writes the President of the United States saying, we want you to get the FBI involved in spying on parents, setting up a dedicated line of threat communication, a snitch line on parents. 5 days later, a memo goes out. He comes and testifies. Looks like he said something that wasn't true to this committee. And the very next day, think about this. I've never seen this in all my time in Washington. The very next day, the organization that started this whole thing in progress, they apologize for the initial letter that started it all. They withdraw the letter. And you guys won't join us in wanting to, we need the Attorney General back sitting right at that chair answering our questions. And you wouldn't even recognize the gentleman from North Carolina. I hope the majority understands how serious this is. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of something we all went through 10 years ago. This reminds me of when the IRS targeted people, and then it wasn't called a threat tag, then it wasn't called a terrorist tag, no, then it was called the BOLO list, be on the lookout list. If you said the wrong thing in this country, the IRS, Lois Lerner, the IRS puts you on a list, much like what we see the FBI doing now, thanks to this brave whistleblower who came forward. So we're going to discuss some of that issue today as well, Mr. Chairman. And I know we have an important piece of legislation in front of us. And I again want to say thanks to the people who came yesterday and testified. It was compelling and powerful. No one should ever feel the way those victims felt, that they had been wrong, they had no real recourse. The expert testimony we heard yesterday, that arbitration is generally a well-functioning mechanism for dispute resolution, was also important. The analysis we heard from Ms. St. John, Ms. Parshall Perry helped to illustrate that to the extent there are problems with arbitration, we should fix those problems. That does not mean undermining a system that in most instances and for most types of claims provides a faster, more affordable, more efficient resolution to disputes. I said it yesterday, though, a right without a remedy is no right at all. In America, everyone deserves justice. And I don't think anyone who heard yesterday's testimony could argue that those victims got justice or that they were treated fairly. We all understand that. But some of us are concerned about how this legislation goes about accomplishing that and the consequences that it could have to a dispute resolution in general. This legislation does more than just change how a specific set of claims might be treated. We have a handful of amendments that we plan to offer today on the arbitration legislation, and we will do that. But we're also going to talk about what we learned less than 24 hours ago, what the Justice Department is doing, how they are treating, how they are categorizing, how they are labeling moms and dads. That is of critical importance. And the fact that the Attorney General said something that is directly contradicted by the email that went out the day before he said what he said to this committee, and we now know from this whistleblower, I think should be of paramount concern to this committee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.